All right, it is Wednesday, and I am welcoming the incredible, the emotional, Alyssa Farah Griffin behind the table. Hello, Alyssa.
Can I get a hug?
Sure. So if you did not see the view today, we're joking about this because we did a hot topic that was it about crying at work? How did we end up there?
It was about like Gen Z are dealing with anxiety and stress.
And needing bathrooms.
Yeah, they'll use the bathroom as like their place to kind of hunker down.
Yes.
It makes me think of the scene in Mean Girls where Lindsay Lohan like takes her lunch tray into the bathroom to go in there because she doesn't have any friends.
Yes. So
Yet.
The concept that people occasionally get emotional at work was stunning to some of the co-hosts. It was not stunning to some others. And you admitted that there's been times where the job has gotten to you and you've cried and suddenly, and to the shock of some of the other co-hosts. But I think this is actually a lot more common than people think.
I think so. I think the problem
It's a younger
too,
generation, I think,
maybe it is because my producers also were like exactly the same age. And as I prepped, I was like, oh yeah, like, you know, when you need to step out because you're going to cry at work. And she's like, totally.
Yeah.
No, I think here's what I'll say is I've never, actually once in my life, but I was very intentional my whole career that I wouldn't cry in front of a boss or cry in front of coworkers, like in the workspace.
Sure.
Like I wouldn't in the middle of whether it's a briefing at the Pentagon or in our like bullpen meeting start crying. But I've absolutely, in most jobs I've had days where it's you just need to go somewhere private and take a few minutes and gather yourself. And for me, it's because there's stress at work. It's just a fact, there could be so many factors, but you also don't turn off your real life. So when you have stuff going on, whether it's health of people in your family, whether it's things like I've talked about my IVF journey that you're dealing with, or whatever kind of things I'm not someone personally who can turn off my brain and
it's not severance. There are
days I wish it was severance, but like you can't turn it all off.
Well, especially I think the job at The View in particular, and to be clear, you're far from the only co-host that's cried at this job.
I've cried with Sarah, so I know that others have.
But tables passed as well. But I think like the thing people don't necessarily realize is that you guys are, this is not a scripted show.
Yeah.
You are completely raw, emotional, and talking about things you feel very deeply and often arguing strongly, passionately about things you feel very deeply.
That's what I think oftentimes is missed. It's so different than being on like a CNN panel or something. You're talking from your personal perspective, how you feel about things happening in the world. And honestly, even just yesterday, we were talking about the horrible floods in Texas and Camp Mystic where all these lives were lost. And I teared up on air. I've cried on air as well, too. I really try not to.
Right.
But I also I think that sometimes it's a human reaction that anchors and hosts of shows have.
I think because you and all the co-hosts are very composed on air, and especially with this table. There's not a lot of like emotion that carries over from segment to segment.
But for me, I think one of the hardest parts of this job is that it's an expectation of the job. And I feel like it's an honor of the job that you have to show some of yourself. Like I've opened up about very personal things in my life and I have felt empowered to do that. And I felt very largely supported by the audience for it. But it is tough when you share these really personal struggles, but then there's days that most of the audience isn't with you and you're sharing, something that's unrelated to that, but maybe a viewpoint.
But you still have to be core to your real feelings, and that's a hard thing.
In reflecting just what I personally believe. And then when you sometimes can get backlash, or if it's, you feel like at the table there's not other people supporting your viewpoint, it can feel isolating. But what I will say is this. I'm so grateful. I mean, I'm grateful to the whole team. Like you not to butter you up, but you've been wonderful when I've had tough days. Whoopi is a rock when I'm having a challenging day. And even though there are so many things she and I disagree on, think of her career. She's like, of course I wouldn't cry now. She's done so many things that like she's had to have a backbone of steel and overcome so much. And she always imparts in me like you control how you feel about yourself. And I'm not perfect, and I have definitely cried in this job. I try to listen to her when I am getting upset and think of like I can control how I feel about myself, and I can't let these other people enter my space. Or if I took something and it felt hurtful the way somebody said something to me, like I have that control. And then I like Sarah Haynes is just the best hug you're ever going to get, and I will go to her if I'm having a tough one.
It's an interesting conversation, though, because I do think it's a lot more common than most people realize. I mean, television is an incredibly stressful environment to begin with. I've never cried at The View, but
never too late.
Never
to cry
too
at The
late.
View.
Yeah, give it check back tomorrow. Yeah. But I have my first job, I worked in another show, and I not Letterman, and I did cry one day.
Some people can turn off. I can't turn it off.
Yeah.
I feel very strongly about remaining professional in the workplace.
Well, as a woman, I also feel like you're also almost under more pressure not to be emotional sometimes.
Well, that's exactly right, and especially when you're in male-dominated spaces,
right.
You feel that pressure of if you show even an ounce of it. I can think of so many before this, because this is a female panel, but whether at the Pentagon, whether at the White House, where you were in situations and the biggest voice in your head is retain your composure, because you cannot feed into that sexist narrative of women are emotional, or women are going to be impulsive, or they can't be in these decision making things. And I've had jobs, by the way, you and I have talked about, when I was at the Pentagon, I remember when we were hearing that one of our bases that I was in touch with the head of public affairs there daily was under a ballistic missile attack, and I didn't know if my colleagues were necessarily alive, things that are weighty and healthy. And I'm very good in a high pressure situation of don't think about your feelings. Don't even think about what the answer is ahead, execute and do your job. But I got to tell you, once you leave that day, once I went home,
it catches up with you.
It hits you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
And that would sometimes be tough too, because I couldn't even talk to Justin about some of the work I was doing, because some of it, not that, which I shared, but fell into the classified space. And he would see it on me, and he'd hear it in my voice that it she's clearly holding pain and stress and anxieties, and didn't have an outlet to share it. And that's where I feel very strongly about mental health and taking care of yourself.
Absolutely.
Exercising, eating right, doing what you need to maintain your peace, meditating if I can get myself to focus long enough. It does matter, because there's a lot happening in this world that can it can weigh on your soul.
It absolutely can.
Yeah. And I'll say what I loved about this job, because it's not without its challenges, but what I love is there's this huge team no one ever sees that's behind the scenes. Our producers, our social media team, everyone who we're all actually friends behind the scenes. We support each other. They pay attention to whatever is going on in everyone's lives. And when there are days that are rockier than others, you always know that you have a safety net and people who are going to check in on you and look out for you.
Absolutely. And it's sincere, and it really is a family. I know people say that about all places, but one of the great things about this show, we're 28 years in, and one of our top producers was Barbara Walters' assistant on the pilot.
Yep.
I mean, this place has been through it.
Yep.
So it's
we've got a lot of lifers. It's actually really incredible.
It's really great. All right, let's do some hot topics. We started today talking about X and the Grok AI, but you really talked about the larger issue that governments around the world are not moving to put guardrails around it. In fact, there's some efforts to keep guardrails from going up. What are your biggest concerns there?
I think AI is incredibly powerful. I use it daily. I think I probably use ChatGPT more than I should. I always then fact check it with outside sources.
Yeah.
It's going to and already is part of all our daily lives. But I'm really worried that machines are learning faster than we can keep up with, and that every single tech giant, every elected official, every head of state agrees that there need to be guardrails, yet it doesn't feel like anyone's actually offering solutions to do it. So just I use the example of Marco Rubio because he and I had kind of similar situations take place where someone was impersonating us when we were government officials. But what they're doing with him is so much more sophisticated and advanced. And it just shows that in the course of 8 years, how much more advanced AI is. It can look like you. It can sound like you. Think with bank fraud. It's already hard enough when somebody's oh, put in this detail, we need this from you over a text. But think when it's somebody who calls and they sound like someone you know, or they sound like your neighbor. I think there's just the world we as a society need to educate ourselves on the good that it can contribute to society, how it can make us do our jobs better, but also the huge risks with it. And I also feel really strongly, this is what I want, by the way, and the next political leader I'm going to get excited about is somebody who's talking about upskilling workers to exist in the future economy.
Absolutely.
So I think of anything from airline pilots to doctors down to, somebody who's working in some sort of a trade profession. All of those jobs will eventually be automated. It doesn't mean that a human won't exist in them, but what are we doing to make sure that we're learning the skills to stay relevant in the next workforce and we're not having like our livelihoods wiped out? And I want to see somebody talk about that because it's happening faster than we think it is.
No, it's an evolution, but it's here, and there's no getting around that. It's funny because it's always been important to me. I've always been a tech guy, a gadget guy to a certain extent, and I've always looked at people in the generation beyond me and been frustrated with family and other people. Like how do you get left behind? Like I'm never going to let myself do that. I'm never going to. But it's challenging now.
It is.
You know, I mean, I'm using every tech piece I can and understanding it the best I can, but I see how it happens. I see how people get comfortable and don't move on, and you can get outdated
you
very
really
quickly.
Can very quickly.
Yeah.
But the X part is super interesting because this is a whole other animal. So since Elon's taken over X, it's become, I'm still on it. I refuse to let go of it because I still find that news breaks quicker on X than it does elsewhere. But I mean, it's become a cesspool of racism, bigotry, sexism, like all the worst actors online seem 100%. To be amplified on X. So it's not really surprising that the chatbot Grok, with the right tweaking, basically turned itself into an anti-Semite within like a few hours. Like it was wild, the things he was saying. I thought it was fake. And then I looked and saw real journalists pointing out that it was real. And it shows if like garbage in, garbage out is what's going to happen if your AI is following an algorithm that is kind of full of trash.
And I kind of really enjoyed the whole process of people on X using Grok to fact check Elon and the cesspool in general.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. But of course.
And what's kind of crazy about it from a business perspective is Grok showed that he does work. I'm making him a he. That he does work very well.
Misgender Grok.
I know I don't want to misgender Grok, but like because he was at times contradicting Elon and other Twitter executives or politicians who were favorable to him. It showed that is how a neutral like AI that's fact driven should operate.
Right.
So the fact that then the algorithm was shifted to be more, I think it was suggested to be more populist, which became anti-Semitism really fast.
Yeah,
is really scary.
Yeah, and X has said they're actively working to remove the inappropriate posts, and I assume continuing to tweak the AI. But it is really, really scary and fascinating, honestly.
It's also like not loosely related to this. I opened X the other day, and like you have your section of people you follow, and then it has the For You section.
Yeah.
The For You section is like the list of every person whose opinion I would like to avoid for the rest of my life.
Same for me too.
Like it's like the most terrifying lineup. But I saw somebody sharing a allegedly like a headline about Pope Leo saying that he was no longer going to recognize same-sex couples. And I saw that. I was like, that's no way that's true. If I was like, if that was true, it'd be breaking news on ABC and everywhere else right now because that'd be a major, departure for a church of something like 6 billion people. So I Googled, it's not true, but it's got millions of shares.
Right. Nobody takes the time. Well, I see it with The View all the time. There's fake stories about this show every single day.
Yeah.
And they're complete garbage.
And I get asked about that. I was just being on vacation. I had several people be like, who was that guest that stormed off The View? I was like, I've been here 3 years. No one's ever stormed off The View.
That's never happened. And people believe it and share it and comment on it. And it becomes fact to them because they don't want to be bothered to take another step and check for it.
And in some cases, it confirms your bias that you're like, oh, I don't like The View, so I'd love the idea of somebody storming off.
Right. And people know that they'll get clicks if they do that.
And similar to the AI point you made, like, I think we kind of have an obligation to teach ourselves and to keep up with the tech.
Yes.
We also have an obligation to like check on the information we consume.
Absolutely.
If it doesn't take that long to figure out if something's not true.
No, and it doesn't have to be something bad. Something can be too good to be true for you also.
I run into too good to be true occasionally.
I do too.
I'm like, this just makes my point a little too well.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
But I still use X because there is a lot of content about the show on it, so I check it out for that. But also, I use it for breaking news, and I use it for sports. That's like my big thing. My
husband
it's
only
the fastest
does
thing for sports, but you can't filter out the other stuff sometimes.
I know. We joke my husband's algorithm is so different than mine because it's literally only like Red Sox content, and I'm like, what a pleasant user. Well, actually, it's not that pleasant of an experience right now, but he would tell you.
Not for Yankee fans either.
Yeah.
But what other platforms do you use? What do you consume at these points?
I mostly am Instagram and X. Instagram, I like Reels. I feel like because I won't be on TikTok because of the
China
not breaking off from China, you get a lot of the content from TikTok over Reels. It's just a little bit of a delay.
Yeah, it's like 3 weeks later.
Yeah, I'm like, I get my dopamine hit of like good content there. And I do think the user experience is better. Meta's I can't stand Mark Zuckerberg, but I think they've done a lot better in allowing you to filter content that you don't want to see, because it allows you, like, I'm not interested, or I do not want to see this. I'm offended by this. So you can help curate your algorithm more.
I read something yesterday that Threads apparently is making a late surge and is coming back to relevancy.
I do use Threads, yeah. But my Threads is like this totally pleasant vacation experience. Even though I follow a lot of the same people I do on X, it's just different.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it'll keep evolving. And the one thing, not that we have to talk about this the whole day, but the lack of understanding that Congress seems to have over basic technology is terrifying.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
That is why it's not, because it doesn't need to be ageist, because there are some older members of the Senate. There's a few, like Ron Wyden's weirdly really well-versed on some of like social media and tech and where it is today. But it is why I feel strongly about getting like next generation leaders, like people like Maxwell Frost, who's the first Gen Zer in Congress, because we are going to live with the consequences of the rise of AI and technology, but also like we are living it every day.
And listen, very smart older people can absolutely comprehend this if they set their mind to doing it.
But I've watched enough
to.
Congressional hearings when they're like, well, TikTok says this.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I mean, it really terrifies you.
Yeah.
Because it is important that they get this right.
And like, to be honest, it's one of the few areas there should be able to be partisan agreement.
You would think.
Is having some degree of guardrails.
You would think. I mean, people forget that the first decision to ban TikTok was Donald Trump.
Yeah. And then he backed out on his own decision.
That'll happen.
Yeah.
All right, we've got another story here. We want to talk about this New York City mayoral race. It's funny because we try to stay away from just doing New York-centric stories on The View, but this really has national implications. A little background here. The current mayor of New York, Eric Adams, is running as an independent. The Democratic primary winner is Mamdani, and he beat the former governor, Cuomo, who was the presumed favorite until maybe a week out, and then it started getting questionable. He obviously has a lot of his own baggage, some of the way he dealt with COVID in the nursing homes, and there's some harassment accusations. You posted today that Mamdani is already proving to be a massive thorn in the side of Dems. Tell me why.
Okay, so here's where I'm going to give Mamdani credit. He ran on pocketbook issues and the cost of living. If you live in New York adjacent, or you live anywhere in the country, the cost of living is too high. People are working as hard as they ever have, but their dollar's going less far. The ability to do things like buy a home is being delayed for a lot of people. He focused on the right issues. My critique of him is, but what are the solutions? And this is somebody who's running with an incredibly thin resume to oversee the economy of New York City is comparable to South Korea, Italy, almost Japan. It is an absolute business and economic hub of the United States. And some of the proposals that he's saying, I think, would chase business and residents out of here so quickly, like you will not be surprised to see. And then on top of it, I think Democrats were excited because he's young, he's energetic, and he ran a smart race. But now he's doing what a lot of times happens when you have these kind of more, to the far left or to the far right candidates. He's talking about engaging in primaries against sitting Democrats. So there was reporting today in CNN and the New York Times that he's looking at building a political operation, aides around him, to primary sitting Democratic members in the state of New York.
I saw even Hakeem Jeffries' name.
Even our friend Hakeem Jeffries was on that list, who I literally asked earlier this week, are you going to be endorsing him? I think he ultimately will. I think as the leader of House Democrats, he has to, because he's got the Democratic nomination. But Hakeem Jeffries, one of his jobs is to get Democrats reelected and try to win back the House. And that is tough if you're in a swing district. If you're in a district that you won, it's, D+1 or it's dead even. Running at the same time as somebody who's calling themselves a socialist and is calling for, government-run grocery prices, or is being dogged by defending phrases that I believe and many, many people believe are anti-Semitic in nature, that's going to be a drag in those districts. So it puts someone like a Hakeem Jeffries in a really tough position.
It definitely does. At the same time, he was able to energize people in a way that we've been talking about how Democrats have not been able to do it anymore.
But what not going to give advice, but what I think Democrats have to find is somebody who can energize and turn people out, but also can govern once they're in office in a way that's going to keep people energized and not be disastrous for the places that they govern. And I guess it's too soon to say. Maybe I'll be surprised and the great socialist takeover of New York is what we all need. But I think what I would think, if you're Hakeem Jeffries going to this meeting they're going to have, he's got a lot more experience in the game than Mamdani does, and he should talk to him about how he needs to be working hand in glove with the party and with other Democrats. And it's okay if you want to be out there further on certain issues, but like the goal should be to get more Democrats elected. Now, that said, I say this as Donald Trump literally actively is threatening to primary and has chased like Tom Tillis out of the party.
Yeah.
It's never good party politics to chase your moderates out of your party. That's how you don't win majorities.
Now, he's not mayor yet. Do you have a read on whether there's any chance he won't win?
I think he's favored to win. I think there'll be very big money and organized efforts against him.
Right.
I think what a lot of voters, and I'd be in this boat if I'm not a New York City voter anymore, is look at the other options. Eric Adams, I think a lot of people see him as corrupt.
Yeah.
I think he's an okay mayor. On a scale from Bill de Blasio to, Rudy before he went crazy, I'd be like Adams is somewhere in the middle. I don't know, but I think people have major issues there, and this idea that Cuomo would maybe run as an independent and get back in.
He is doing it apparently.
He is. I kind of think the people spoke on Cuomo, to be honest, like in him not winning. But if he did that, I think there's going to be people being like, all right, do I have more of an issue with this or with some of the things that Mamdani has defended? It's tough. I think he's still favored to win.
Now, yesterday when Trump was asked about this, he suggested that if there was a socialist mayor of New York City, that the White House might have to take over New York City.
I like how it's like, we are going to fight socialism by being more authoritarian. Like, I'm like, I don't like any of these extremes. Like, no. I liked old school America. I'm Constitution America.
Oh, yeah. Remember that?
Yeah, I'm Team Constitution. It's absurd you wouldn't have any legal. He said the same thing about D.C. as well. But I do think it underscores, an audience member said something to me very interesting after the first time we talked about Mamdani's victory, which was, she said, I'm a Democrat, but I'm worried that he's too green to take on Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And green meaning young and inexperienced. And she said, she's like, I voted for Cuomo even though I have issues with the harassment stuff. And I don't know where people land on that. But I think if you're a Dem who's like, who is going to be the person who fights for my city when Trump inevitably does, what we saw in LA, what we've seen in California, I could see people being like, I want somebody who's really formidable.
Right.
And Cuomo would fit that bill, but he has so much baggage.
I think you're right. All right. Well, we're almost out of time, but I do want to mention the fact that tonight, the daytime Emmy nomination for talk show host is being announced. And tomorrow, the rest of the nominations are going to come out at noon. This is a big day for me, basically, and the great team at The View. Last year was your first nomination, which was very exciting.
It's very exciting.
We had a lot of fun when we went out to the Emmys last year. Sonny came, and you, and just you two, I think, host-wise, right?
Yeah, host-wise, but our husbands came.
And and some of the, Robin, who works with us, and a bunch of other people. Our directing team won the Emmy last year. Any chance you'll come out again? What do you think? Maybe? Can I work on you?
You can work on me. Well, I always love an excuse to go to LA, but I'm also squarely in the camp of it's genuinely an honor to be nominated.
It is.
Because I'm like, we didn't win, but for the rest of my life, I could say that I was Emmy nominated.
Yeah,
and that's really
absolutely.
Cool. And when you look at the competition, it's very formidable, incredible people.
Is.
So
no, it definitely is. It's a fun night and everything else. I mean, again, we haven't been nominated yet. I don't want to count our chickens. But
I might cry at work tomorrow if we're not. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm definitely going to cry at work tomorrow if we don't get nominated. Believe me, I'll cry on the podcast. But I'm excited. It's always it's a great day, and I like to see everybody.
And for what it's worth, I do think we're particularly deserving this last year. If you think of the news that we made on The View, the caliber of guests, we had sitting president, former presidents, presidential candidates, but then also A-list celebrities, huge interviews, like
big hot topics, big discussions,
big debates. Not to say it's because it's not I love all the shows that were nominated last year and all the hosts, but we are different in that we take on some of the weightier topics, which again is what makes this job at times really hard. Yeah. But I think it's so important right now, and I appreciated that it was recognized.
All the shows are so different, and they're great, and the ones that win deserve to win. I think Kelly Clarkson won 5 in a row last year, and she's the best. Yeah, good for her.
She's literally Kelly Clarkson.
Yeah. God bless. All right, so that's all the time we have for today. But if you're listening at home, feel free to root for us.
Yes.
And thank you for joining me, Alyssa. Tomorrow I'll be back here with Anna Navarro, and we will see you then.